Protection and Housing Scrutiny Review Board meeting. Today is the 22nd of September 2025 and we're at 6 p.m. So we'll start off by going around the room and doing some introductions. So my name is Councillor Matthew. Yes, Councillor Khan.
It's good for us on this committee also. I see your name on the last minutes.
I
believe so, yes. I don't know where he is today, sorry. Do we not have a name for him?
No, there's not a nameplate for him, he's not here.
I'll double check that and correct.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we'll go around and do a round of introductions. So my name is Councillor Matthew, I'm Councillor for Oakwood Ward and I'm the chair of this committee.
I'm Councillor Celia Ingold. I am Councillor for Chellaston and Shelton Lock and I'm the vice chair of this committee.
I'm Councillor Gaurav Pandey and I'm Councillor for Rackworth and New Zealand Ward.
I'm Councillor Stephen Falk. I'm the Councillor for Alveston South.
Councillor Jangir Khan, Normanton Ward.
Councillor Gekir for Normanton.
Hello, I'm Councillor Martin Nelson, Chaddiston West Ward.
I'm Chief Superintendent Emma Aldred and I'm Divisional Commander for Derby City and
Bob Gill, Head of Community Safety. And Craig Stanley, Democratic Services Manager.
Obviously, thank you everybody. And Emma, as your our guest here, I'd like to thank you very, very much for coming along to present to us today. To start off with apologies. I don't believe we've had any apologies for this meeting. Late items, there's no late items for this meeting. We have taken the decisions. We have it on the agenda item 6 localities update. We aren't going to bring that item to this meeting. Having discussed with the head of localities, there isn't really anything to bring that wasn't brought last time. So it was felt that we'd be wasting their time and our time to bring what we've already covered. But I have had their assurances that once something is ready, we'll bring a report and make sure that's done.
Okay, so
No, sorry, it's not that you take a seat, we'll carry on. Takes us on to item 3, so declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest for anybody at all? No, Fab, I'll just put on record for this one that's between October 21 and May 23. I was the permanent member for Community Development, Place and Tourism, which did include community safety. From what I've seen so far, I don't think there's anything on the presentations that would preclude me from chairing the meeting, but just to make sure that that has been declared. Okay, so takes us on to item 4, so minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of June 2025. Anybody any issues, or should we declare that as a true record? Fine, thank you everybody. That takes us on then to item 5, update from Derbyshire Police. So I'll just say a few words before we come on to this. So obviously we had violence against women and girls as something that we were already scheduled to bring to this meeting, which we are going to cover. We as a board specifically asked for a report on knife crime to come to this committee, because certainly from my perspective, I don't think there's been a time where residents have brought knife crime up to me as much as they are doing at the minute, and where residents in the city are as concerned, as scared and as fearful about knife crime in our city. In May, we of course saw 5 stabbings in 12 days. We had the murder of Govinda Johal, we had a stabbing in Alveston, we had 2 men stabbed during fighting in Normanton, we had a stabbing on Mercian Way. After that, we saw the fatal stabbing of Dale Martin at Emerson Road and the smash and grab of a shop on St Peter Street in broad daylight, then another stabbing over in Ilkeston, followed by another stabbing on Pear Tree Crescent in Normanton. Just this month, we've seen a fatal stabbing off Kedleston Road. There was a knife found in a bush in Little Chester in August. There was a stabbing in Sunnydale Park on the 12th of July, and reports of a gang of armed men with weapons on Stony Lane in Spondon. Over the course of the last year, as well as those that I've already mentioned, we saw the jailing of Deontay Freeman for his 7th knife crime. We saw Leonard David jailed for a knife point taxi robbery last August, 2 knife point bike robberies on Bass Recreation Ground, and in January, several local shops held up at knife point. I don't think it can be disputed at this stage we're a city that is struggling with violent knife crime. We may disagree on whether it's rampant or not. We may disagree on how safe or unsafe we feel in the city centre. But with this many incidents in the space of just a single year, I don't think we can doubt that we are struggling with knife crime at the moment. A fact I think is, and certainly from what I've seen talking to residents, many residents at the minute do not feel safe in the city centre. And I think that's a deep concern for all of us. And we all need to work together to address that and to improve that situation. Derby residents want and deserve answers. They want to know what's happening, why it's happening, and what is being done to tackle an ever-increasing list of knife crime victims and knife crime fatalities. And it's our job as the community's Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Review Board to ask questions and to secure the answers. I'm very pleased to have Pop and Emma with us for the presentations today, and I'll hand over to you both.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go through a presentation just to kind of set the scene, and then Emma will the knife crime and org elements. And then I'll just finish up with kind of a rounded view of the work that is currently underway.
Thank you.
So, just as a reminder, in terms of community safety, we often see kind of the individual organisations, what's the and the questions get asked, what are the local authority doing, what are the police doing, etc. But I just wanted to kind of reset the tone here that the majority of whilst we've all got our own individual kind of roles and responsibilities when it comes to community safety, we do come together under the Community Safety Framework, the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, which established the Crime and Disorder Partnerships, more commonly known as Community Safety Partnerships. And this isn't me trying to deflect in any way, it's just really trying to emphasise the partnership work that we're involved with and how we try and complement each other in our roles and responsibilities. You can see on the left there the 5 core responsible authorities: local authorities, constabulary, fire and rescue, integrated care boards, and probation service. It's our collective responsibility to establish a crime and disorder plan for the city, identify our priorities, and develop rolling annual plans and delivery plans against those. The key within that is undertaking community consultation to do perception surveys, etc., to determine those priorities. Next slide, please. Within all of that context, since the Act came into being, there have been several other duties that have been placed onto to local authorities as well. So our responsibilities in working in partnership have grown: domestic abuse duty, domestic abuse related death reviews, modern slavery, prevent in terms of extremism and terrorism, the equality duty in relation to community cohesion, serious violence duty, which we'll kind of go on to in more detail, and more recently the Victims Act and victim support for serious violence, domestic and sexual abuse victims. So there is a lot of work that goes on in that partnership environment. Next one, please, Craig. We are currently reviewing the governance structures for community safety, both within the city and the county. There's a lot of overlap in terms of the other work that we do. Individuals who want to commit crime don't see borders, they don't see the city and county boundary, and we do see that movement across borders. We're in the process, as I say, of reviewing that structure. One of the new elements that we brought in, and I will come back to a future review board to talk about this in more detail, is the Responsible Authority Chief Officer Group. Previously, all 9 community safety partnerships have operated independently, but we've recognised, certainly over the last 18 months and certainly the last 12 months, we need to bring senior chief officers together around this agenda more cohesively. So that group there is in its infancy. It's one interim meeting. We've got a further one at the middle of October. But that will essentially bring, if we look at it from the policing perspective, ACC Michelle Shooter is the chair of that group. And from a local authority perspective, it's Sam Dennis as the strategic director for community. So you can see the emphasis we're starting to put onto this. Below that sit a number of thematic boards, Serious Violence Partnership Board being one of those. And next one, please, Craig. Just wanted to spend a bit of time on this one, because whilst this serious violence duty came in more recently, it re-emphasises that partnership working emphasis on the community safety partnerships as being the mechanism for delivery. And you can see there, kind of in terms of the first 3 bullet points, what that duty requires: work together to prevent and reduce serious violence, conduct a local needs assessment on serious violence so we can understand what to do and where to do it, and develop and implement a serious violence strategy and delivery plan. And again, I'm kind of emphasising this to reassure you that serious violence isn't something we just do as the day job when it happens. There is a partnership and planning that goes behind it. We're on to our 3rd iteration of the strategic needs assessment, and our 2nd strategy is currently under development and will go out to consultation within the next month. So you will all have sight of that to comment against. And again, you can see the responsible authorities that are part of that. We've got a much wider membership, but that's the core group. Within that, we do have 2 specific subgroups: the serious violence tasking subgroup and the nighttime economy subgroup as well, that develop the more operational delivery. I'm just going to pause there in terms of that's the background to the partnership. If there's any questions before I hand over to Emma and what the figures are telling us.
Any questions from anybody at all? Councillor Khan?
We've got 2 task groups. It says subgroup and serious violence task group and nighttime economy subgroup. Can you just elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so those are the operational groups that deliver the actions. So they meet on a regular basis, look at key issues that are emerging, and be more responsive than the strategic group that is looking at the strategy. And they're the ones who develop some of the other. I've got a slide that's going to come at the end of this, and you'll see the type of work that they've been developing and delivering. But it's more the operational day-to-day work.
Yes, I think to try and sort of how you would envision that's the forum where we look at habitual knife carriers, what are we doing around those individuals, the wider sort of more holistic work in terms of areas, hotspots. So that's the level of sort of the tasking group that group looks at, and also nighttime economy. So where are our pinch points in the city centre, where are our problem premises and venues, and then it's the wraparound care that we then do in terms of responding to that. So that helps you just to visualise what those 2 groups look like.
Any more questions for anybody? No. All
right, thank you. So in terms of what we're asked to bring today, we'll look at knife crimes first. There's a comparison in terms of where are we sort of over the last 5 years, and then also where are we in terms of the last 12 months and any increases in that. So for Derby City alone, from 2019 to 2020, there were 411 knife crime offences. That then reduced in 2020 to 2021 down to 368. We saw an increase in 21 to 22 to 390. It reduced again in 2022-2023 to 370, stayed relatively stable at 371 for 23-24, and then looking at the last 12 months, we're at 364. So in terms of over 5 years, it's been fairly stable in terms of numbers over the sort of the last 3 years, and certainly in a better position than what we were 5 years ago. So knife crime has remained stable, but given, there's a lot more that's reported, there's a lot more that's coming forward. I think that it's at the forefront of people's minds in terms of it's not necessarily knives are involved per se, it's the level of violence that's being utilised, which is why I think it's very much at the point where people are now in fear and questioning, are we actually safe when we're out and about? So in terms of, we were asked around convictions, but that's Crown Prosecution Service data, so I weren't able to access that. But what I did have a look at is in terms of what are the positive outcome rates. So what has got a positive sanction at the end of it, whether that's somebody charged, whether it's somebody cautioned, there has been some positive formal from that. So for Derby City, again, it's averaged between 18.5% to 20%, which has received a positive outcome. The latest 12 months up to now, given we've got a few months left, we're at 19% for positive outcomes. I think we probably don't publicise enough the good work that's actually going, and that is something that we've discussed as a partnership as well in terms of how do we improve our partnership communication to show that actually it's a collective effort. So in terms of knife sweeps was a question as to whether or not what are the outcomes of knife sweeps. So that data is not available, and I think some of it is we need to try and establish some consistency in terms of how we're utilising that. So there's projects that we're looking at in terms of knife amnesty bins in the centre. What does that look like? What's the access point to it? And also we run Operation Sept twice a year, which people are obviously able to surrender any weapons in terms of that. The next week of action for that is the 17th of November. And again, we will be reporting on the success of that. So we're also looking at if you factor around nighttime economy, in particular around metal detectors for people entering into premises, and that obviously requires buy-in from some of our venues. So it is very much a partnership effort in terms of our landlords of our public houses and venues, and that sharing of information and intelligence as well. So in the last 12 months, 17% of all knife crime within my division is attributed to the city. And the next area to that would be Derby West, which is 12%. So if you're looking comparatively in terms of how that's actually broken down across the ward areas, the city is not massively an outlier in terms of how it's broken down into incidents. And I can obviously share all the ward areas. I don't propose to go through it now because obviously there's a lot of areas. But if it gives you some context in terms of the city, in terms of the proportion of knife crime against the backdrop of all of South Division, then that's where we're at. So what are we doing to tackle knife crime? Obviously, Pop has got a further slide which we'll come on to. But just in terms of, I've talked about OpSector, and we're also doing a Crime Stoppers collaboration as well, which will be a targeted campaign with multiple platforms, and it's trying to target areas such as Snapchat, so to try and tackle some of our younger, how they engage or what they're seeing in terms of the online space, because I think it's something that we need to acknowledge, that it's not just what we're seeing out on the streets, it's how are they getting that imagery and information, and where people are making knives and bladed articles almost a fashion statement in terms of it. So, you know, there is a lot of work that we need to do that is in the online space, as well as through education, through the families and through our partnership. We're trying to establish a football club partnership against all those local ones, as well as Derby County and Chesterfield Town Centre. These clubs are looking at dedicating fixtures to the issue of knife crime and supporting joint social media campaigns. Players from men's, women's and youth teams are involved in creating some video content. So again, we're trying to branch out and get to a wider audience in terms of the messaging. We've got a couple of key events coming up, one particularly around the city centre, which that event is on the 26th of November, and that's with partners including ambulance, fire service, police first aid, trainers, safer communities, and others. And we're looking at doing something similar in Ilkeston as well, because it's, as noted, that's an area of concern as well in terms of knife crime. So that's an event that we've got coming up. Youth engagement, we are looking at wraps to basically go around surrender bins. So how that then looks in terms of, again, it's trying to take that imagery or that excitement imagery out of play in terms of actually, do you know what, knife crime ruins lives. You reeled off a number of events, and I obviously led on the media for the murder of Dale Martin, and we're obviously at charge phases, and a further 6 have obviously been charged with murder on that. There is a lot of good work ongoing. Some of it we can't obviously go out public with because of where it is within the judicial process. So sometimes that makes it difficult for us, because we obviously know a lot of things that are happening in the background that unfortunately we just can't share. I also led on the media in terms of the passing of the information around ethnicity of offenders. Again, you know, that's very welcomed in terms of that from that point of view, and you will see that more and more as we report on it. The data that we've got available to us is our safer neighbourhood teams are also assigned in terms of knife crime and serious violence, and we're working towards the neighbourhood guarantee as well. So I've taken an action away from a community summit that we held recently, that Baggy MP pulled together to try and sort of make our city feel safer for people visiting, and obviously for our residents as well. So I'll be reviewing resources in terms of what we supply around the city, and looking at also the times of demand and have we got that right. We've also got some longer term initiatives around that. So I talked around the surrender bins being in city centres and some other forces of, and local authorities. So I think it might be Leicestershire that have got local colleges and schools involved in designing a bench that is actually made out of knives that have been surrendered, obviously with some messaging around that. So we're having a look at things like that, and also Lancashire Council approach have got surrender bins at recycling centres. So actually, can we think wider in terms of potential third-party sectors and partner agencies? So there is a lot of good work ongoing around knife crime, and it is difficult that we can't always report on a lot of things, but I do appreciate and understand that it just seems to be everywhere at the minute. Whether that's social media, there's a lot of misinformation as well, so you'll get things shared on social media that's not even our area, but it is, yeah, it's actually purported to sort of be our. Again, we're working really hard, but when you get into the technology side of social media and where that comes from, it is really difficult. So please be rest assured that we are doing everything we can around it, and I think that the strengthening of the partnership and obviously the actions that have come out of the community summit that we held a couple of weeks ago is testament in terms of how serious we're taking it. And just around nighttime economy, and this sort of leads into violence against women and girls as well, is I've recently reviewed and relaunched a strategy around how we police nighttime economy, and that is, again, it's evidence and data led, and we now have certain position points within the city at differing times. We utilise, and what I would like to see, and we're trying to work this, is actually getting some more third-party sectors out and about to sort of help with that sort of street pastor, caring, safety side of things, whilst we're obviously doing enforcement. The feedback that we've had since operating like that, we have seen a reduction in crime, and we've also seen a significant reduction in assaults against officers as well. So that has been a positive in terms of how we're tackling nighttime economy, and we're also looking at opportunities where we can maybe enhance CCTV coverage as well. So those conversations. Has anybody got any questions around what I've covered there?
Councillor Knowles, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. First of all, well done on Stenson Road. That's really terrific news about Stenson Road one. One quick point about knife bins. How come it's taking so long? You know, the knives have been going on for the last 3-4 months, and bins have really been put in the minutes.
Yeah, so we're looking to look at that around. So OpSepta is a national campaign. What we're working through is, and it's always the same, funding elements of it. Where do we place them? Where is it appropriate to place them? Where do our communities want to see them? So there's a few layers that we need to work through in terms of how often do they get emptied? Who does that? Contracts, you know, it's that element to it, but obviously it is a positive.
We've done it before though, so it's not the first time we're doing it.
No, and there's always different opinions as well. That some people welcome them, and then other people say actually we don't want them because it gives a bad sort of perception about our community. So you'll always get those different opinions, but you know, it's like you said, what is happening, because we do need to make some positive steps forward.
Second quick question. You're saying about women and girls getting abused. I get casework of men getting abused by women, and I've never heard anything from the police. What we're doing about that?
From my perspective, if there is those kind of incidents, then they should always be reported through. And if they are being reported through but not acted upon, then please feed that through to me, because I will more than happily have a look. Although we have got the Vogue agenda, you know, that is not a reason to actually say or dismiss that we've got it the other way.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Pandy, your hand was next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. So if you go back like many years, these bins, was the amnesty the first thing the police thought of tackling this kind of crime? And is police thinking of getting hard with this sort of big problem? Because to me, amnesty sounds like a softy approach, you know. Is there a like hard approach to tackle this crime? So like stop and searches, yeah, or maybe some fear of enforcement amongst criminals who have been fearlessly using crime and creating terror amongst the public. So that's one thing. And also with the school engagement, so it's like there's direct school engagement with all the schools. Is that happening?
Right. So first point around amnesty, I think that's probably a terminology aspect to it, because an amnesty makes it sound like it's short-lived. It's something that just is there for a short period of time and then we move on. Whereas actually we need something a little bit more permanent. We need that constant messaging. And what we're looking at by doing these surrender bins, that would be more ongoing rather than, you know, for a 3-week period, there will be an amnesty bin. This is more looking at longer term.
But to me, amnesty sounds like, you know, I can do it and then maybe I can surrender it and no one is going to ask me anything. So there is that. Do you not discuss that kind of question?
Yes, we do. And then in terms of the other elements of the enforcement side of things, we obviously work through the tasking forums that I talked about. Who are our individuals who, you know, are regularly coming up. We utilise covert and overt techniques as well. Stop search, we get a lot of scrutiny around our stop search, but our find rates are high. So that tells me that in terms of we are stopping the right people, and we're obviously getting, when whether that's weapons or drugs, off.
We're going to be here stop search in your whole presentation. And also if you read social media comments and general perception amongst public is the online sale or the ease of buying these knives. And that also didn't get mentioned in the report. So is that policing or the community safety? Are you looking into that? I know that the law could be from the national government, but is there anything happening at the local level which is targeting this big problem?
So I think in terms of the online market, it is an absolute beast, and it is bigger than what we can tackle in terms of local. You've obviously got your National Crime Agency who look at your next tier offenders, but for every outlet that you could potentially buy from, there will be another 10, 15 on the back of that. So trying to police that is a really impossible task.
But
I'll hear about that.
Sorry, Council. I really would say that when we talk about the online sales, that is way beyond our capability to respond to. We lobby, but it's not within our power to do anything there. Yeah, Amazon, Temu, overseas sales, it's not something we are able to control.
And the black market is then an other avenue. There was another question that you had on the back of that. There was the stop search and the enforcement side.
School, I think.
The schools, yes. So not every school has a schools officer assigned. We do have youth engagement teams, and that is something that we're looking to try and increase through the neighbourhood guarantee as well, is actually to try and get that youth engagement aspect better. We've worked with some of the more problematic schools who are seeing increases to try and improve service provision, and where we've done that, we have seen a positive result from that. And again, that identified some issues in terms of sharing of information where it wasn't necessarily. So talking about St Benedict's School here, but actually doing that review of what we've got, really it identified some of the shortfalls that we've got, which we've now bridged, and actually the issues have decreased in terms of that.
Yeah, there is, sorry again, Councillor, there is a challenge here as well with education establishments, because, how do I phrase it, they don't always want to admit that there is a problem because of the perception and the reflection upon them. There have been, in years past, we had knife archers, we had knife wands issued out. Many don't want to go down that path because, one, it stigmatises all of their students, but it does also then send a very negative perception out about their premises. We can encourage, we can support, but ultimately the decision lies with them.
As a resident, I would really like to see the comms from council and from the police as well. You guys have like huge channels of communicating to the public. I think it would be great if the comms can be really pushed up to give the message. Council comms teams as well, that maybe local media is also here,
Yeah,
that can all the messaging that can be a positive step.
Sorry, Councillor, that was picked up at the summit recently, that we don't talk enough about what we are actually doing.
Yeah, we don't do joint communication enough.
That's been resolved.
Yeah,
I like the idea of involving football.
Yes, yeah, it is just trying to be creative in terms of how can we go out to sort of the wider audiences. Any other questions?
Councillor Rawson, I do.
Thank you. The most common explanation that you can pick up in the media and elsewhere as to why young people carry knives, it's said to be because they feel unsafe, and then as a result of that, make the decision to carry a knife to protect themselves, to make themselves feel safer. And then when a dispute occurs, the knife gets used. Is that, in your experience, the most common reason? Are there other reasons? And if so, what can we do to sort of try and prevent the carrying of knives sort of at the root cause in terms of understanding the psychology of it, trying to prevent it before people even.
Yeah, so it is the most common used reason, but you need to put some context behind that as well in terms of it's not necessarily the reason. There is usually drugs activity beneath that. There's feuding, social deprivation, you know, violence that they've seen growing up within the home. So there's a lot of factors that contribute to it that people just think it's okay. And then there's also the aspect of trying to get into sort of a position within a certain group, trying to impress. And you know, you get it's the cool thing to do if you do it, and it depends on what circles you're in. But generally, we've not got a lot of young people who are not involved in some level of criminality who will just go and arm themselves with a knife to go about the daily business because they don't feel safe.
Sort of other issues underneath it which need to be addressed.
Which is more than enforcement, which again is why, from a partnership point of view, it really needs that holistic approach to it in terms of actually what do we do through generations of families? How do we break the cycle of violence, of domestic abuse, of troubled backgrounds? Because generally that's the path that it follows.
Councillor Khan.
Yeah, I think Councillor Pandya has taken my question away, but I'm just going to briefly ask you. You know, the operations, stop and search operations, I feel that they still need to happen in certain, especially I'm known from all different communities, different cultures. They need to be educated. They need to learn that this is a crime. Somebody carries a knife, it's a crime and they can be sent down. So yes. I think that message still has to go very strongly from the police, because this is a criminal activity that we don't accept. And stop and search has to happen, because I think a number of years back, people like myself, when I was growing up, stop and search you were very scared of the police.
Yeah.
So if you carry certain things, you get caught and taken to the police station. So I think that needs to come back again.
I think around stop and search though, you have to have the set criteria available to enable using that as a warranted power for a police officer. And if it's not there, then obviously we can't utilise it. So we need to know that, you know, or suspect those people to actually have something on them for the purpose of what's in the legislation. If that's not there, we can't just do random stop search. And there's a scrutiny panel, and you'll have seen, and it's a really contentious issue as well, especially around race, ethnicity, and, you know, targeting, discrimination. So police will only utilise and work within the powers that they've got, and it is really stringent in terms of what we've got.
So you do one-off operations. I understand racism and other element come in. When stop and search was first introduced, yeah. Racism was a big issue, because saying they were targeting black and minority community, and it was going against the police. But after a while, it just settled down. But I'm just saying that if we one-off operations in certain part of the city, so that the community are aware that if they do carry knives, they're going to be stop and search anytime. Yeah, and if they find knives, they'll be sent down.
We don't have the powers to do that. No.
Councillor Fout,
I think this is possibly aimed more at Popland, Chief Superintendent. Last week I attended the Children and People's Scrutiny Board, and the chap there said that there's 3D headsets, which me and the chair have both been party to watching, And they frightened the living daylights out of me, to be perfectly honest, because life wasn't like that when I was at school a good many years ago. But he said that they're not being used yet, rolled out properly. And then in the council chamber the other night, Councillor Chambers said that they'd been in full use for 2 years. Now, which one's right? Are they being rolled out? Are they being used? Because these 3D headsets that they were said they were going to take around schools, to me, would have a very large help in stamping out this. As Councillor Rawson said, that it would help take some of the tit for tat out of it, that I'm taking that to protect myself of what the events could be. So I'd really like to know, are we taking these headsets into the schools or are we not? Because last week I got 2 different versions.
Jumping quickly, but the issue we were told at CYP was that there was an issue with the licenses, and that was why they hadn't ever been used.
But then we were told that we'd been.
Then we were told, yeah,
years.
Yeah, I'm going to give you half and half an answer. They were in use. So when we first had them a couple of years ago, we were taking those around, and we were also using those in community settings. There is the issue with the license. From November, we are rolling out again to schools.
What was the issue with the license?
It's just the software licenses. We purchased them when we it was through the Safer Streets 5, I think.
Yes,
funding, funding that we purchased them, and when we purchased an oversight, the licenses were only in play for 18 months. We hadn't projected the funding to renew the licenses to continue them further. So obviously we had to realign budgets. That's now been done, and they will be starting to roll out again from November. So maybe do a session here one night.
We did when they first were brought. Certainly want to board. We'd certainly look to bring them back again if we'd all want to.
I don't.
Yes.
Yeah, by all means. But I've seen one on knife crime.
I got it wrong as well.
And I saw one on gang-related ones. Did you see both?
I've only seen the knife crime one, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I know there was a gang-related one as well.
I've seen 2, and I say, my age, it frightened the life out of me. I lock the door at 7 o'clock and don't go out. But
yeah, just to reassure councillor that from November they are being rolled out.
I think they will be a good tool to take around schools, because it would, because I think they said they were going to include parents in these particular schools, so the parents and the kids were going to see them, and I think that would help an awful lot going forward.
Yeah, it was just a quick one. The knife amnesty, when you have the boxes, does that work well? Because I don't know whether I'm trying to think from someone that's carrying a knife, so I don't really do it, so I don't know whether they would actually feel they could come and put a knife in a box and not be seen or not be caught, so to speak, or not have any repercussions. Do they seem to work?
It's surprising, actually, in terms of how successful they are. It's frightening in some respects. And you can look at it positively in terms of whatever is put through those bins is weapons that are taken and removed from the streets. But we know that there is obviously, it's easy to, and that's why people do choose knives or bladed articles, because they are readily available in your kitchen.
Yes.
So again, there's legislation that we need to work towards in terms of what is classed as an offensive weapon or a bladed article, and so it is surprising on how successful they are. But we still need to tackle the wider issue.
Thank you.
Another problem which has come up with the residents, they say if they will report an incident and if the crime hasn't committed, then police will say because the crime hasn't committed, we will not do anything. So where is that again? And again, hearing the whole report, it seems like stop and search can't go ahead. The online sale cannot be tackled. So I don't know, where the improvement is going to be made. And if you can please elaborate on this part, that if the crime isn't committed, then what does police do?
So from an enforcement point of view, and obviously we try to work within the prevention space, but ultimately we are an enforcement service. Then if there's not an offence or crime committed, what are we investigating? So is it reassurance for that person that's taken the time to ring it in, because there's obviously, it's been significant enough for them to make the call, but they would be advised that there's no investigation to follow. So then it would be trying to understand what are the needs of that individual then, on the basis of what can we provide from a policing point of view to fulfil that, or is it something where we can refer to somewhere else across the sectors to support?
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thank you very much for those things. It just occurred to me that I think with the social media problem, especially amongst teenagers, social media is a minefield, with Snapchat especially. Parents could look at a child's phone, but they might not actually see what's on there, and there are, kids are often better at using the apps and everything else than parents are. As an adult, obviously, there are ways that you can obviously report crime. It occurs to me, especially with things like Snapchat, we are maybe relying on other teenagers reaching out and showing their concerns. Have we looked into creating kind of anonymous or safe routes? Because as a teenager, you don't want to call somebody else out and then snitch or these sorts of things. It's why bullying happens all the time, because people don't want to speak out. So is that something we've looked into? Because I think we are reliant on other teams, I think, a lot of the time when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, I think, Crime Stoppers is obviously our main forum for anonymous. We're then looking at options in terms of how we can report things through to local neighbourhood teams in a way that is more effective, because then you've got a local person that is picking up the issue and not somebody from a central point of view. It's probably worth looking into in terms of any aspect from a national perspective as to whether or not we've got that facility to be able to do that, or certainly a facility that would appeal to the younger market in terms of them reporting things through. We do get quite a lot of malicious stuff already coming through on Crime Stoppers. There's a danger with that, but nonetheless, it doesn't mean to say that it's not worth having a look at.
Thank you.
Any more questions for anybody at all? Okay, I've got a few, but I'm cautious there is another slide to do, and I think that answers at least one of what I would have had. So do you want to carry on, and then I'll ask some at the end?
Oh, Craig, can you just load it up? I won't spend too long on here, and Susie won't go through all of it, but so this final slide really does reassure you that, as Emma has said, in that partnership space, there is actually a lot of activity that is going on. Some of it within schools, some of it within communities, some of it within prisons, some of it with our high-risk offenders. And that's all the kind of direct one-to-one work we try to do. I think one of the key ones is the offender focus groups, actually working with those who have carried and committed offences with knives. This is all part of our understanding as to what are the drivers, how do we get further kind of from the edge of the cliff to start preventing the escalations. But as Emma has said, you'll usually find, yes, some people carry them for protection, but more likely than not, there's another driver behind it. It isn't just purely protection. If it was, everybody would be carrying a knife because everyone's scared. There's usually a reason why you want to carry a knife, to protect yourself. The serious violence tasking, again, just emphasising that one, that is a regular meeting regarding named individuals, known hotspots, locations where police and partners discuss those individuals and see what the best options are. And that then falls into the police patrols, disruptions and deterrence. It's not just about the visible policing. There's a lot of work that Emma's teams do, especially within the city centre, around some of those known nominals and hotspot areas. So yeah, I just wanted to reassure you that there is a lot of activity going on within this sphere. biggest challenge is people 18 plus. Young people, it's quite easy. Schools, I was going to say youth clubs, youth centres. There are still some of those about. But, if we think about that list of crimes, Councillor, that you read out, sorry, Chair, that you read out, when we look at the profile in that respect, the much harder element to engage and reach are the adults of this city.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just a comment really about stop and search. If we know that it's going to be people link certain links, intelligence about that, it makes sense to base any interventions on that intelligence rather than just randomly stopping and searching people. So.
And that's where we need to work in that space of there needs to be some information and intelligence for us to be able to identify and stop that individual for the purposes. So.
Any more for anybody at all? No. Okay, so I've got a few questions, but first of all, thank you for the report and the presentation. That's been really, really helpful for all of us here to see the picture that's been provided to us. So thank you both for that. We've had a bit of a discussion already about the knife amnesty bins, and it is really good to know that they do work when they go in. There was talk a bit ago about having one in the council house. How's that sort of discussions progressing around that?
Probably not going to have it in the council house. There are numerous reasons. One of those being kind of the policing of the city centre. It's almost counterintuitive to ask people to come into the city centre to deposit their knives when we've got to focus on preventing people coming into the city centre to carry their knives. And this is, as Emma said, it's the difficulty of actually trying to find the most suitable and appropriate location for these.
Okay.
We're still scoping.
Yeah. We mentioned as well, so the offender focus groups. So how does that work? Is that sort of offenders talking to other offenders? Is it offenders talking to people who are at high risk? How does that?
It's more practitioners working with those individuals. So through probation service for adults and the youth justice service for younger people, it's that one-to-one engagement and almost mentoring of understanding what were the motives, what were the drivers, what would prevent you, because that helps us shape the future projects that we want to do.
Okay, what would be the scope really for a situation where you have offenders talking to people who are deemed to be at high risk of committing knife crimes about, so their experiences, and using that as a bit of a prevention tactic? Because it seems to me that, as we say, if people are walking around either with a knife for safety or if that's their excuse or justification, they're not seeing the wider picture. And I think there's the stat somewhere that says if you carry a knife for safety, you're more likely to be stabbed, and often you're quite likely to be stabbed with your own knife. And I think people aren't seeing that wider picture. What is the scope for? I imagine there would be issues with it in terms of that safety element. Is that something that can be put in place long term?
So these do take place across a number of different crime types, where you've got offenders who have been rehabilitated and utilise their experience to deter young people. And again, we do that through our youth engagement teams, and that's something that we are wanting to strengthen across our schools and youth establishments anyway. So those kind of things are available, but again, it's the willingness of your educational establishments that want to have that in their space, and it's surprising on how many parents actually don't want that in their schools. So there's a number of factors involved in that prevents it from happening.
Got you. And so leads on to my next question. Really, we mentioned that obviously there are problem schools, and we know there are problem schools in the city, but that sometimes head teachers or other people in authority in schools aren't wanting us to take those sort of enforcement actions. Is there anything? I don't know if shaming the schools is the right word, but it's the only word that comes to mind at this point, because that's essentially sort of not treating lives as expendable, but saying, well, a stabbing might occur, but at least our reputation's not damaged. And I think that's disgraceful that that's been the priority. I can understand to an extent why they're worried about negative headlines, but I'd be more worried about a pupil being stabbed than I would a bad headline in a paper. So is there anything we can do to bring the attention to them that essentially, we saw I think it was a few months ago, the horrendous stabbing in Sheffield that took place. Is there anything to do to say this is an outcome that you are risking if you're not willing to take more steps? Is there anything we can do around that?
It's more around the engagement and the continuous engagement and discussion. There is one particular school that we've had numerous discussions with, and they have turned the curve in terms of accepting that there is an issue and that there is more that they need to do. And I think that's the only way we can do it. If we try to go in hard, we're talking academies with kind of national presence, and they can push back pretty robustly.
I can understand it, right? It's deeply concerning, and it'd be interesting to see if engagement fails, if there is anything else we can do. It certainly would want to see that investigated, because if a knife wand can prevent something, I'd rather that than the consequence of a knife wand not preventing something. So yeah, it'd be interesting what more we can do there. And leaning into that, we mentioned as well sort of problem premises in the city centre, and I remember being the cabinet premises was something that was being looked into then, and reports were being compiled of a list of those premises. What can we do about problem premises? Because it's one thing to know they exist, it's another thing to be acting on them. How do we act if we know we've got a problem premises, we believe people are there and they've got knives on them, or whatever the situation may be? What can we actually do about the problem premises we've got?
A lot of work through licensing. In terms of visits, we do spot checks. If we do get information intelligence, there will be some plans around that. The nighttime economy strategy that's now in place is flexible enough to be able to do that. And I think they have seen a difference in terms of policing presence and how they deal with it, which is why we have had a decrease in crime since doing that. And we're trying to do a lot more early intervention. So even in the rumblings of it's becoming problematic, we deal with it before it becomes a problem. And ultimately, they'll lose the license. We had the Ilkeston, premises. We removed their license. Significant serious incidents have happened as a result of that. And so we will take action where.
And it's good to know we've got that power. That if you're not complying and serious things happen, your licenses will be removed. That's really positive. We talked a little bit about the availability of knives as well, and how you're trying to police the sort of entire internet, the entire black market, and then the streets as well, to try and find any possible way somebody could get hold of a knife when every one of us here have got knives in our pockets. It does present a next to impossible task, really. What sort of effort is there to ascertain whether knives used in offences are bought sort of legally or illegally?
It's really difficult to even determine, and then you're reliant on the individual telling you sort of where they've got it from, and factored in, because we have got residential premises within the city as well. It's your domestic related, whether it's domestic related homicides or those including serious violence, it is an everyday item that's in your house, and so trying to police that as well is extremely difficult in terms of when it's in people's private residence.
We mentioned as well the sort of 20%, I think it was, it's 17-20% positive rates. It's one way to read it. The way the public would read it was that's an 80% not positive rate. What does sort of it actually mean if a rate is not positive? Is that not a conviction? Is that they didn't go to jail? What would that mean in terms of? So
there could be all sorts of reasons for that. So that might be that our victim or complainant or witnesses don't want to get involved and won't provide sort of the evidence that's required to take it to that threshold. We still do evidence-led prosecution. So even if we have got a victim who doesn't necessarily want to pursue with a complaint, we can pursue that regardless, provided we've obviously got the evidence that meets the threshold to take that through. It could be that there's not enough evidence to say that the likelihood of that has happened. We get false reports too. So there is an whole host of reasons as to why there's not necessarily a positive. But obviously everything has to be justified with this.
Yeah. And how do we, it's a question I imagine you ask yourselves every day, but how do we get that to a higher number? How do we get that 20% to 25?
So we do that through everything that Pop's gone through. You know, we do manage performance like every month in terms of where we are. Knife crime and serious violence it's got its own structures around it. That's how significant it is and how serious we take it. So it's got its own performance measures. And if we're seeing a dip in that, then obviously we're asking questions why and trying to understand that. And it's through the education, it's through increased enforcement, it's through better sharing of information, so that we can act upon things. But I think we need to do more in the preventative space, because we want to tackle it before it's an issue, as opposed to waiting until it becomes an issue, and then you just you're firefighting then in terms of what we've got.
Just two last ones really from myself. So obviously one of the best kinds of evidence we can get is CCTV. So I think Pop, this is probably more of a question for yourself. How are we doing in terms of broadening CCTV coverage in the city centre and then wider out into towards, obviously just seen CCTV going at Chaddesden Park. How are we doing in terms of widening that CCTV capacity that we have?
I'm actually taking a bit of a pause on the expansion. What I've on the cusp of commissioning is a complete audit and review of our CCTV estate. Obviously, recent years we've had new cameras go in from Safer Streets 3, 4 and 5. We've got a lot of aging kit out there as well that's been up now for 10 to 15 years. We've got servers, routers, etc., that are also starting to pass their expiry date. So we are looking to commission CDW as our contract provider for IT to do a deep trawl through all of our kit, all of our connectivity, servers, everything that makes the CCTV system, to basically identify what do we need to do to future-proof it, what do we need to do if we want to expand coverage as well. Because the last thing I want to do is bolt on more cameras to a system that then falls over.
Obviously, there'll be a cost and time frame associated with that then before we can get any new cameras and widen that coverage. Do we have a time frame?
Not for the review. I've got a meeting with Mark Walker and the ICT team on Thursday morning. We're starting the scoping with CDW. I'll get the time frame after that meeting.
I've been really interested to know where we are. Councillor Khan, saw your hand up.
Just touch on the cameras, because I think you remember recently at the fasting month, what went on in Brighton Park. The full month, then the council had to put evening security. I had my doors broken down, first time ever in 20 years. And when I asked the police, the nighttime cameras, they said we don't have nighttime vision, so we can't identify them. Because the road has got a camera on every gate, so that is safety for the people in the park. But when I experimented myself, and asked the police to get some recording and all that, said we couldn't find the council said we didn't have nighttime video.
And this is part of the issue. I say those cameras have probably been up for a number of years now, and obviously technology has moved on. You see some of the grainy images that get released, and I know, Emma, you and your teams are kind of frustrated that when you come and download, it's degraded, it's not the best image. Again, this is why we need to do a complete audit to understand what the true cost of repairing, replacing that system is going to be.
I think it would certainly be interested to know that when we have it. I think all members of the committee would be interested in that. Councillor Clark?
I'd just like to ask Pop, in Allenton, we had a camera put up, as you're well aware, and I've complained many times that instead of it focusing on the shops, it's pointing down the road. Now, if you want it to be a traffic camera, pay all that money back and we'll use it on something else if you want to use it as a traffic camera. But I've been talking to the people that work in Heron in Allenton, and many a week people go in there and do their weekly shopping and walk out. They don't bother with the tills because that's an irrelevance. But that camera should be focusing on the shops, not on the traffic. And I've complained numerous times about that, because if there's a queue of traffic, well, nobody's going to do anything about it. But if there's a robbery at the shop, we may be able to do something about it.
leave that one with me. I will speak to the individuals involved and see why it's not been
Yeah, well, I've had numerous assurances that it's not looking at the road. But if I took you down there now, to be facing up towards the Crown on the road.
I wonder, Bob, if it might be possible for members of the committee at another meeting to see the CCTV rooms downstairs. I mean, I saw them on a purple flag walkabout a few years ago. I wonder if something like that might be possible, because I think I'd be interested to see them again. I think all of us would be interested to see them. Is that something you think might be you take away and come back to us on?
I'll look into that. I'm sure we can. IG might have a few kittens, but I'm
sure
there's a way.
I'm sure we can all sign them if we need to
Well, we're not going to
see
put them
that.
out to do
No.
just want to have a look at the telly.
So just
No, that's the bit that we're worried.
we'll walk in and close our eyes. Yeah. It's the one final question then for myself, just around resourcing. So we heard obviously the CCTV upgrades and things are going to cost us money. The amnesty bins, there was discussion there as well about the fact that we need more resourcing. How are we doing on resourcing? Is it a case, as it normally is, that more money would allow us to do more things, but are we at a level of resourcing that we're happy with, or do we need a bit more to be really pushing more things?
You could always do with more. And kind of being serious about that long list that I put up on the slides, the majority of that is funded from government grants that are sent passported to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, and then as a partnership, we determine how that is spent. So we are reliant on external funding aid, and obviously from a policing perspective.
Yeah, so from a policing perspective, we'd obviously like it to be staffed more and additional hours in terms of coverage. And again, you know, there's arguments for could a police officer sit within the control room, but then we're already limited resources out on the streets. So do we want a warranted officer sat viewing CCTV when actually we want to be out about? So we're looking at a volunteer scheme to extend those hours. The issues with that though is it's not necessarily consistent. They'd obviously have to go through a training and a vetting process for that, but it's an option for us to try and improve.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Chair. And you know, from a financial perspective, if we were looking for 24/7 coverage, so just to cover the hour, we're talking just shy of 170,000.
Any further questions from anybody?
Thinking right, the government just said you'll have your own neighborhood police officer. Well, probably on the beat again.
Yes.
The old days. Is that something going to happen, or still up in the picture?
Yeah, so if you can go online and look at your ward area, and all officers who police that area as part of your safe neighbourhoods asked to have a photograph on, so you know who they are. So they are allocated to each ward area. The communication portal as well is you can report things through, obviously provided it's not an emergency, but you can report things through to that particular team and get a response or some action within 72 hours. That you will have that contact back.
I mean, probably on the beat, talking with the public. My understanding was that we will have some in certain part of the city, we will start having probably on the beat of the community relations and working with neighbours and the community.
Yeah, so we will have safer neighbourhoods. We have PCSOs who obviously do all their patrols on foot. We're carrying vacancies across both safer neighbourhoods and our PCSO cohorts as well. And again, that's what we're looking at and going through our current recruitment phases as well. But ultimately, that's what we want to get to.
Yeah, this is fine.
What hours do PCSOs have? Again, I see them now more in Allington, walking about, but what can they actually do besides give you a quick pointing at. They can't actually arrest somebody or whatever, can they?
No, they can't. They can detain someone under certain criteria, but again, that would then require a police officer to come and support. PCSOs was always supposed to be part and parcel of your community engagement. They do that element of it as opposed to enforcement. They're extremely good in terms of collating and gathering intelligence, and obviously because they do that engagement with whether it's local businesses or residents, they submit that, and obviously we act upon a lot of what they submit. But also different forces have different powers for their PCSOs, so it's all what the Chief Constable decides they want their PCSOs to have in terms of powers. So you will find it does differ across the country.
Any more from anybody on knife crime? No, perhaps. I mean, I have got a recommendation that I'd like to put forward, but it touches on violence against women and girls as well, which of course we've not mentioned on yet. So do you want to move on to the violence against women and girls section?
In terms of the stats around over the last 5 years, and I think you'll probably see in terms of where the Vogue agenda came in. So going back to 2019, we had 7,420 incidents of note. It then peaks in 2021, 2022 to 9,322. Now, we had increased confidence in reporting when it became part and parcel of people could see that this was actually being taken seriously. So naturally, you do get a rise in terms of that. When we then started obviously looking and and scrutinising and looking at performance around what we were doing around victims against women and girls in 2022, 2023, that reduced down to 8,312. And where we're at this in the last 12 months, we're at 7,755. So we're almost back to where we were sort of 5 years ago, but we have seen that peak across the 3 years in between. We obviously do a lot. It does factor into the nighttime economy. There's the varying campaigns. There's the Ask Angela that obviously some of our licensed premises, most of our licensed premises actually do. When you actually look at outcomes for it, just for Derby City alone, 5 years ago we were at 12% in terms of our positive outcomes. It's stayed fairly consistent, and we're at 12.8% in the last 12 months as well. So again, you know, there's a lot of reasons as to why, where's the other percentage to obviously make that up to 100%. But a lot of this is through, we get a lot of information through third-party sectors, charities. It's recorded, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a crime at the end of it that would then get an outcome for it. In terms of investments, again, it sort of links into your CCTV element of it, improved lighting. We've obviously seen protests as well, which has been very much around sexual offending, and that has been targeted around asylum seekers in hotels, and we're obviously responding to that. Again, it's Clare's Law as well, which was obviously introduced, and I think because there is that increased confidence in reporting, we are seeing an increase in where people are asking for information related to Clare's Law. So they are taking positive action in terms of, actually, I want to understand what behaviour this perpetrator's got as well. So where there's repeat victims, repeat locations, we obviously do a lot in terms of work around that, and whether that's through our PCSOs or through our specialist teams, we do pick up on those. So we are seeing increased reporting. That's a positive for me, because that means that where we've been previously, where people have said, I can't report it because I won't be believed, actually we are getting the reports through and everything is investigated in terms of it. it doesn't necessarily result in a charge in every circumstance at the end of it, but it is all reviewed. So the right to know and right to ask is being promoted nationally and locally for us, and we've seen an increase year on year around that. So again, I think it's people who are wanting to break cycles of behaviour and are having the confidence and the structures and the support structures to be able to sort of come out of whether that's abusive relationships. Because the Borg agenda obviously covers a lot of elements in terms of incident types. This might be from somebody looking at me strange in a park, or I've been out running and somebody were acting strange around me, to the real sort of your stalking, harassment, domestic abuse. So we're talking, when you're looking at those numbers, it is an array of incident types that comes under the Borg agenda. I don't know if you want to touch on anything in terms of sort of the safeguarding elements of it, because there's obviously a lot of structures around how we look at both sort of child and adult elements of it. There are, similar to what you saw in terms of the tasking groups around knife crime, we've got that around sexual offending. So there's the similar structures are in place around that.
Yeah, and some of those elements, certainly the high risk offender management, that picks up sexual offenders, and then we had, you may have seen the ISBIS, sorry, I put an acronym on there. That's the Independent Sexual Advocacy Service, and working directly with victims as well. And we'd already mentioned the support workers such as the street pastors in the nighttime economy. We have our taxi marshal service as well. So that, again, there's a range of things that we do around that. And certainly, I think it's one where in the future, once the Chief Officer Group is settled and we review the thematic boards, a report back on the domestic abuse and sexual abuse thematic board and their work would be, I think, a relevant one to bring back.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions for anybody?
Thank you.
It's just going back to Claire's law and ask for Angela. I just heard something when I was in full council that there's also one ask for Clive. Has anyone heard of that one? Because someone said that was a thing and I didn't think it was.
I think Alison said that. Going on, even I have not heard of it.
No, I haven't.
So no, that's not an initiative that we've got.
I won't tell people to say that then. Right, thank you. That's it.
Any more for anybody at all? There's one from myself. It's around that asked for Angela one. So there was a report, a BBC report much earlier in the year that was talking about how Ask for Angela may not be working because the turnover in bar staff and the turnover in those premises means that people weren't being trained up on it. People that knew about it were leaving. We're now into the new university year. A number of people who will have worked in nighttime establishments left in June, July. A number of new people are going to join in the next month. Are we testing it in premises to make sure that it's working and that members of staff know about it?
Yeah, so Dan Hanley-Farrell, who is my licensing inspector, does a lot of sort of dip sampling and dip testing, and they also have to submit reports of where it's been utilised in premises. So if you have got premises where you've not had any at all, they do go and have a chat and is there any training issues? They're also going through, because they do it through Freshers Week as well, to do the educational piece around keeping safe when out and about, to try and tackle that issue of the turnover of staff. Is, do they need any training? Do they need any sort of event putting on? And there's some merchandise and branding that's just happened as well around the Ask Angela to give it a bit of a refresh. Because I think sometimes when you get so used to seeing, whether it's posters on a wall, you then almost notice it. Yeah. So every now and then it does need that refresh and that push, and they're just going through that now. Yeah. So we review all the ones where they report that we have asked, 2 or 3 people come and ask for Angela, right, how did you deal with that then? Actually, one's resulted in a report coming through to the police. Another, we just got them a taxi and discreetly sort of took them out of that situation. So we do review them, and then we also see whether there is any patterns of sort of customer type that are obviously targeting certain.
Okay, so I think that answers it, but just double check. So we do have people that sort of go into a premises, let's say at midnight, 1 o'clock, ask the member of staff for Angela and see what their response
Yeah,
is.
and we do it as part of their licensing conditions anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, they sign up to things voluntarily, but whilst we're there, it's an opportunity to ask.
Yeah, it's brilliant to know, because it's one thing for the landlord or the manager of the business to say, yes, we do it and we train everybody on it. It's another thing for somebody to go to the person on the bar, ask and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that's really good to know.
I think Derby is doing quite good, because I've been to a few premises where the posters have been displayed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the team has gone out and spoken to the premises. I've not seen this in any other areas, but I think well done to your team.
Yeah, no, honestly, they are really robust, and any sniff we get of anything, I'm straight onto, Dan.
It's brilliant to know. Yeah. Any more from anybody at all? No, fabulous. Well, again, thank you so much for bringing the reports. Very much appreciated. I do have a recommendation that I've written out, and that Vice Chair's agreed to second, so we'll take everybody's views on this one, which is that this committee urges the leader of Derby City Council, the relevant cabinet member, Chief Constable of Derbyshire Constabulary and the Derbyshire Police and Crime Commissioner to make tackling both knife crime and violence against women and girls their priorities, and to do everything within their powers to ensure that any budgetary requests associated with taking the crucial steps needed to tackle these offences are fulfilled, to ensure relevant departments and bodies are sufficiently staffed and properly resourced. So it's more than anything saying that these are offences that we want the Constabulary to be prioritising in their work, that they're resourced, and that they're listed budget-wise. It's not sort of saying every request ever made can be fulfilled. We all know that's not the case, but it's around doing everything within powers to ensure that these areas are properly staffed, properly resourced, and being prioritised going forwards. So I'll take anybody's views on that. I'm happy, not precious over the wording. If anyone has any changes they want to make. No, fabulous. So I'll put that to a vote then. So all those in favour of that? Fabulous. That's everybody. Brilliant. So again, thank you so much for the reports you provided. Very much appreciated what you provided, and I thank all members of the committee for the scrutiny given to this one. I think we've asked a lot of very good questions and got a lot of answers that we would have wanted. So thank you both very much for that. Yes, I'll ping over to you. So move on then to, I mentioned at the start, but Councillor, now as you joined us just after, so we heard from the head of localities there wasn't really an update to provide us with that they hadn't provided us with last time, but I'll be checking in with them in advance of the next meeting whether there's anything to update us on at that stage. So we move on then to item 7 on our agenda, which is update on fly tipping investigation and enforcement contract. So pop over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provides an update on the 12-month pilot contract for fly tipping investigation and enforcement. It sets out the reasons why the pilot has now concluded and outlines considerations for future arrangements. In December 23, the Cabinet gave approval for a pilot scheme to test whether contracting a specialist provider could strengthen our response to fly tipping. In April 24, the contract was awarded to Kingdom Local Authority Support Limited. The contract was designed to operate at no cost to the council, with activity focused in the Abbey Arboretum areas, which incorporated the city centre and Normanton wards. Over the 12 months, Kingdom issued 2,210 fixed penalty notices for 80 for fly tipping and 168 duty of care notices. Of those, 807 were paid, generating an income of just over 88,000. For context, public protection officers issued 29 notices for littering, 115 duty of care notices, and 31 for fly tipping in the same period. But that was in other areas. It wasn't in the same Kingdom were operating, and it was alongside their wider community safety responsibilities. Of note, over 2,000 of Kingdom's FPNs were concentrated in the city centre area. The pilot delivered benefits in terms of increased visibility and enforcement presence and showed the value of testing new approaches. However, it also highlighted some important learning points for the future. We need to strengthen focus on tackling fly tipping, which remains one of the most pressing issues for our communities. Enforcement activity needs to be spread more evenly across wider areas, not just the city centre. A better balance is needed between addressing lower level offences such as cigarette litter and tackling more serious environmental crimes. And finally, we want to put greater emphasis on discretion, advice and persuasion to support long-term behaviour alongside enforcement. On the basis of this learning, it was decided not to extend the pilot contract. This decision does not reflect negatively on the contractor, but rather on the importance of aligning our approach with local strategic objectives. Going forward, the council will build on the lessons learned from the pilot to ensure resources are targeted effectively, community priorities addressed, and was maintained.
Brilliant, thank you, Pop. So a whistle stop all through the report there. Just before I come back to questions, I just want to check one thing. So we mentioned the 3 wards. Half of the city centre is now under Darley ward. Were they also covering that part of the city centre, or is it just the southern part?
It was the southern part.
Right, okay, got it. So they weren't in the cathedral quarter. No. Okay. Okay, so I'll throw out to the committee for any questions on this. Yes, Councillor Khan.
You know, you mentioned the pilot project. I think what was that? Kingston Limited. Kingdom Limited. And seen them around our ward in Normanton and all that. I think that money they generated, that money went towards them. So what have we, the council, learned about that? Do we need to employ our own enforcement officers, increase patrols, and generate money from these flight?
Yeah, the key element was, so the way the contract was set up, as I say, it was at nil cost to the authority. And then once Kingdom had covered their operating costs, anything that was made above that was going to be on a 50-50 profit share with the Derby City Council. All of the costs that all of the fines that they managed to have paid essentially covered their operating costs, so there was no profit. Now that's one of the lessons learned here, that as you can see from the figures, the bulk of their fines came from litter. And when I say litter, it was predominantly cigarette litter. It wasn't the emphasis we wanted, which was on the fly tipping. So it clearly shows that if we bring in an external contractor on this basis, they are always going to need to target the fly tipping, the littering. That's the easiest way to cover their costs before they can then start looking at fly tipping. We know from our own PPOs, it's very resource intensive to investigate a fly tip. It could be anywhere from an hour to a few hours, depending as to the level of evidence found. So the way we need to move forward, and this decision we have made, is we are having additional public protection officer recruitment at the moment. Those interviews are taking place next week, if I remember correctly. We're going to increase by another 3.5. That will allow us to start doing some of that work. It's also important that, you know, some of the lessons we've learned, and it's kind of emphasised within the wording around that discretion and engagement with individuals. We had some very negative experiences. I think everyone will remember the Hughes spies feeding the birds on the the river gardens.
It's one of my residents.
Oh, okay. Which, when we looked into, we asked Kingdom to rescind that fine and repay it back to the other lady. There are risks that come with external providers.
Yeah, Councillor House.
Which in the Kingdom did not work. In my area of Region Ward, the fly tipping last 3 months has gone so bad. I can't believe it's still going high. And I think PPOs, if we have extra PPOs, I think they'll do a good job. You're saying taking a fee on. Yeah, that's good news to hear that you are taking them more on, but they'll make the money back as well if you can get the fines going. They're seen in the world. The play itself really is a good thing. Good to hear to get some more people.
No, that's the fact.
Around my ward, particularly when I have a wander around, obviously there's some on the street and you report it and you get it cleared, or you get it referred that the PPO goes another word with the property owner. But I'm sure all the councillors here, there's certain areas within the wards that aren't necessarily right outside somebody's house in a little dark corner. And you report that, it gets cleared. Another month, you report that and it gets cleared. Now, people find out that if they dump the stuff there, they're not going to get caught. It's going to pile up, and then you get it cleared. Oh, it's been cleared. I'll dump a load more there. And I'm sure every single councillor has areas of their ward they can think of. What can we do about them, if anything? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, I haven't got an answer. I'm just wondering how to phrase the answer. In some ways, the simplest solution, and I'm trying to avoid looking at your fellow to your left. You know,
He's a troublemaker, so don't worry about him.
One of the simplest solutions is kind of further investment in CCTV, but for this specific purpose, it is the fly tipping cameras that some wards have purchased. So, you know, we have them for the Mackworth and New Zealand area. We have a new batch coming in for the Abbey and the Arlington areas as well. But they can only act as a deterrent. They're never going to solve the actual issue, because people will then find another nook and cranny in which to deposit that their fly tip. And again, it's a bit like we were talking about the serious violence. To really understand this, it's not just as simple as some people just want to fly tip, so the way they will do it. There are nuances to those who can't get to range vehicle recycling. There may be a whole bunch of reasons why they can't do that, why they have excess. We know landlords sometimes are very guilty of this when they're emptying its properties out. And we are looking at those routes, especially working with the university around the kind of April, May time when the end of the year comes and students start to leave their properties. We're looking now more in advance as to what we're talking about those landlords. And if that kind of directly answers your question, but I say the simple answer is it's more cameras.
Well, that's right. I mean, I can only comment on my ward, but as I wander around and live in leaflets or whatever, there's so many gardens that are absolutely chock-a-block full with furniture, mattresses, and they haven't fly tipped it, but the gardens are absolutely piled up with rubbish and stuff. And I wondered to myself, how are they ever going to get rid of that? Because they can't get to the tip because they probably haven't got anything big enough, and they don't want to fly tip. But the front of the house looks an absolute mess because it's just full of old settees, mattresses, child's toys and everything. I won't use the word that I'd like to use, but there's so many of them that are full of this, and you fight your way up to the doorway. How are they ever going to get rid of it?
It's got to be, we do need a more holistic solution to this. I don't have the answer to it because it then knocks onto other service areas and has budget implications, and then kind of policy decisions there. But yeah, it's not going to be an easy one to solve. Bottom line, though, for us, and this is where the externality notice comes in, if someone does contravene and do a fly tip, is people's behaviour. Ultimately, that is what we need to understand and change.
You know, in my part of the ward in Abrito, both ward, the hotspots are still there every week. Yeah, there's so much liquor that's been picked up by the council, and it's all costs money. So there is no CCTV cameras there. There has been not many fines. So I believe, and I've been saying in my neighborhoods, I've been saying in other meetings, I believe in enforcement action. Yeah, enforcement education, not education enforcement, because there's different cultures live in my ward. They think it's normal. Leave it there, council come and pick it up, and we'll do it again next week. Nobody watching us. So that's why I think something has to be done, because then that's how they will educate themselves.
Certainly on the enforcement, and these are the additional cameras that I've referred to. So we had funding through the agency to buy specifically for the Abbey Arboretum area. So Sarah Tassundra has been looking into that. We just need to get those cameras onto the capital programme and they will then be deployed. We have certainly the Mackworth board put funding into the wildlife cameras that we move around that area. It's not prevented or stopped fly tipping, but what it does do is give us some evidential capability. But again, it's not 100% guaranteed. If somebody arrives in the middle of the night, deposits that fly tip, we don't get a clear image of the car or the registration number. There is no personally identifying information within that fly tip. There's no enforcement.
You know, I believe, Paul, you know, these certain part of the world, word of mouth spreads very fast. One or two enforcement within the community, then people will educate themselves.
But we still need the evidence to be able to.
Yeah, but that evidence, we have to capture that evidence somehow to promote the enforcement within the community.
You know, we ask too many, we as council, we want too much evidence to sort of find people, right? There was a issue a few years back. I had a video somebody sent me. You can see the guy's face. You can see the car registration number wearing the dumping. And then he didn't want to give a statement. But what more evidence do you want after that? You know, you can see clearly who the guy is. The van, he would say the logo is outside. Everything was there. But the council said, oh, tell the guy gives a statement, we can't take it.
If you can share that information with me, I will look into that.
Usually vehicle ones do
Yeah.
fine. Environmental health, I had few of the incidents where the vehicle reg and the evidence was there. That was the.
Yeah, but they want a statement of
that
the
was
guy.
now the statement if I remember.
The guy who was he took the video from his bedroom and he says, I don't want to give my name or I don't want to get him.
If you can share that information with me, I'll look into that because we should be able to just go straight off the identification of the vehicle.
Any more from anybody at all? Okay, I've got a few, Bob, but again, thank you for the report brought. So two of them are sort of who made certain decisions, really. So we made a decision at some stage not to include tackling dog fouling in the list of things that Kingdom could have done. And we also, obviously, somebody made the decision to limit it to 3 wards, not include the top of the city centre or areas, you know, Halverston, Allington, Darley, that sort of area. Chatterston as well, yeah. Who made the calls around those? And should we have done something differently with them, or would this always have been the likely result?
Oh, gosh, I'm having to dredge my memory now because all that was done prior to me coming into this.
I'm happy for you to take those 2 away.
Yes, rather than me try and guess at an answer.
Yes, no. Do we have a sense of why so few of the fines were actually paid? Because they're issuing sort of thousands and hundreds are being paid.
Again, I think it's part of their operating model. Obviously, I'm not in their operating model, so I have to make certain assumptions that flood the market and you kind of reap what comes back in.
Yeah. Got you. I think you've sort of answered this one, but just to double check, really, we mentioned obviously there was a focus on things like cigarette litter. I imagine dropping receipts and things like that as well. I think there probably is enough litter in the city centre to justify 2,210 fines. I don't think you can justify 2,210 instances of you actually catching and seeing the people dropping the litter and being able to award them the fines in that way. So I think it is our view then, that we took somebody on to tackle fly tipping, and the focus has just been, the old lady dropping a receipt or somebody putting a cigarette out. I don't sort of dispute that there are certainly cigarettes are an annoyance. It certainly annoyed me up in Oakwood Ward when someone was putting them out in flower planters. But as you say, it's not the reason we took them on. It was the fly tipping aspect. But turning sort of to the PPOs with that in mind, when the report came through exec scrutiny, we did warn about the idea of them looking at litter, and the warning wasn't heeded in the end, I don't think. But when it then went to cabinet, the cabinet member at the time, which was Councillor Dinser, said that the PPO's inability to do the enforcement in the way that is required and that has failed in terms of income generation were the reasons that this contract was looked at. Now, I don't want to make a political point with that because I don't think the PPOs have ever reached the income generation target. And I think they'd have to issue 3 or 4 times the number of fines issued by Kingdom in order to reach that target. But given those were sort of stated as some of the reasons for bringing it in, how are PPOs going to sort of rise to the challenge that we've got, given the reason this came in was where we were at the time, which was that it was felt they hadn't?
Part of kind of looking back on the history of the PPOs, what we needed them to do and what they were brought in to do were kind of 2 very different things. And that changed from kind of their first iteration, where they were very litter fly tipping focused. COVID-19 and the pandemic changed the role and remit of that team. And we had new people come into it who weren't necessarily enforcement minded. That is really what the then cabinet member was hinting at. Part of the idea was that they would work alongside Kingdom, who were out and out enforcement, kind of learn from them in terms of their approaches. But obviously their approach wasn't quite what we wanted, so we had to go another way. Again, this is part of the recruitment that we're doing at the moment, is ensuring that the skills and capabilities that the new PPOs have 3.5 come in are more enforcement focused. And again, we hope then that that learning will distill down to the existing PPOs. I'm not saying that I'm setting targets, because I certainly am not, but there is a much stronger emphasis on enforcement going forward.
I'll abandon the question then on what would the targets be for the next year. But that's positive, yeah, and I think you're right that PPOs have I think the roles changed 6 or 7 times. Nearly every year the roles have changed. And that focus on enforcement is positive. Previously, there's been pushback on that being the focus. I don't know whether it was PPO managers not wanting PPOs to be doing that, or PPOs not wanting to be doing that. If there's pushback again in terms of wanting to focus more on education rather than enforcement, is it going to be really sort of drilled in that enforcement is either ranking up the list or the priority?
It's going to be a conversation, because in the one sense we need the enforcement to draw the income, but we also want that behaviour change. And yes, fines do give people kind of reason not to do it. But the analogy I use is speeding. I would hazard a guess, not going to accuse anyone having to get points for speeding, but I would hazard a guess everybody in this room knows somebody who's had points for speeding. Yeah. Points for speeding and fines do not deter people from speeding. We know that.
They do deter. You think twice before you speed again.
You yourself doesn't deter.
It's not something at times you do, voluntarily.
Yeah.
At times you can get caught out.
But this is what I'm saying. With the point I'm making here is, at some point, everybody speeds or knows people who have sped, even knowing you're breaking the rule, breaking the law. And that's the point I'm trying to make here with the fly tipping. That people know they are not meant to do this, but they will continue to do it. So we need that behaviour change. And this is that balance between, as Councillor Khan said, is it enforcement or is it engagement and education? Which one of these are we doing? Before we can get to 100% enforcement, because we know we're not always going to have the evidence, we have still got to invest in that engagement and education.
Because engagement has been our role. When I'm a councillor around there for a long time, a community worker, engagement, we've tried everything. So I believe enforcement and education, when they hit some in their pocket, then they'll be more careful. Okay, like you say, speed, maybe to do it now and then, but they'll be a bit careful. They look behind their shoulder and see if the number is watching. This way they just don't do it whatever.
I was just responding into Chair in terms of your question, that enforcement. If we just went for 100% enforcement, we would need far more PPOs, because we would need to literally flood all of those locations where the fly tipping takes place. Plus, we're talking night time. How many times? I used to be the neighbourhood manager in Arboretum and Normanton, and I know you'd go home in the evening and the next morning there's a fly tip because it's been done at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. So we need other.
If we
I agree with the Councillor Khan. The message is that, if the message goes out, this is not acceptable in this, in the area, then people do think before they do it, So if there are signs or whatever, if they've been fined, then like Councillor Khan said, the message does go, it does spread quickly that don't do it because you'll get fined.
But again, the point I'm trying to make here is that we can't just do enforcement. We also need that engagement and education as well. This is why I'm not going to set an enforcement target, because if they fail that enforcement target, what do I achieve by doing that? We do want to get the enforcement because we need the income to cover the costs, because then this is the other aspect of the other decision making here, that again, the PPOs are self-funding in that respect. They need the income to cover their baseline, just as Kingdom did, but we go about it a different way. A longer term discussion here then is certainly in terms of budget setting. Why do we put that income target budget pressure onto the PPOs? There's more than kind of one consideration.
I've got Councillor Core first and then Councillor Carl after.
Just a kind of suggestion, I guess, is that when we do enforce while using a PM, do we at any point report down why the person said they flighted it if we do ask?
They are interviewed under caution, so that we do try and get that reason.
So what I suggest is, well, if we're not already doing it, is kind of aftercare is probably the wrong word, but because not everyone is doing it maliciously, again is the wrong word, but there are a whole host of reasons why somebody might be fly tipping. So if we can also help someone not to fly tip again, that would be quite good. So, if we need signposting somewhere, if someone's struggling with boarding, or there could be a whole host of reasons, and I think we need to be a bit more proactive. So when the fine is issued, we'll also find out the reasons why.
And certainly we've got examples. If Neil was here, he would give examples of local area coordinators then getting involved with those individuals, because you're right. As I said kind of previously, some are just not able to dispose of their waste in any other way. Because, I think I'm kind of rambling now, but I'm sure somebody told me Abbey and Arboretum has the lowest rates of car ownership across the city. And that then obviously has an impact on getting to Rainsway and those other elements. PPO's enforcement are one piece of a very big jigsaw when it comes to waste management within the city.
Councillor Khan, you next.
Yeah, have we got figures every time these hotspots that we clear litter, how much it cost us? And then we can compare it with how can PPSOs we can employ for that money. Have we got any figure that over the year, how much money has it cost us to clear all these hotspots in these wards?
We'll be able to get that figure from Street Pride.
Are you able to get that figure for me?
Yeah. I'm not sure how that would translate into into resources, because on the cost of clearance, I take your points that we're spending the money on clearance, but if we invested that money into public protection officers, we might not get the fly tipping in the first place. I don't think it's a direct comparison that you can make. But I'll get you the figures.
Yeah, the figures, what I'm saying is, we as councillors, at least we can educate community, look what's happening here. Yeah, how much it costing the taxpayer, how much is it costing the public of these fly tipping, because there are issues which we are knowing, my colleague councillors know. So how much money is costing?
I think it leans back into the blue bin contamination figures they put out, where they said it cost the council £300,000 to deal with that, and it wasn't a case of, well, this £300, if we had that £1,000, if we hadn't spent it on this, could specifically be spent on something else. But it was that realization that actually not rinsing out jam jars and not cleaning out things is costing £300,000, and there's all these different things we can do. That I think that's sort of the yes for us. Yeah, getting those figures will be good.
And ultimately, I've said this earlier. This is about individuals choosing to do this, and appreciating Councillor Cole's comment that, yes, some people are going to do it by default because they've got no other option to do this. But in the main, this is about individuals choosing to fly tip.
No option can be applied to anyone. That's not an excuse. Anyone can exercise the dog. Oh, I didn't have any option. That's why I fly tipped it.
Some will have a genuine reason as to
You know,
why.
can I give you an example? I was stood outside my payment. I just stood there and watched a van, yeah, on that hotspot trying to empty the van. I asked him, I said, what are you doing? He says, no English. I said, that doesn't mean no English. Chucking rubbish on the hotspot. Then he realized I'm not going to go from here until it doesn't move. Then he drove the van away.
Somewhere else.
Yeah, so he thought this is hotspot. There's rubbish there because they can dump it.
So Fark, how do you next?
All I was going to say, to point on from what Councillor Khan says, but if you knew the cost for certain areas, but we, not just councils, if we knew the cost, I can think of one particularly, and you could put up your dump in here as cost the rest of the council taxpayers this amount of money. And then it may want to make one or two. I mean, the serial ones, you're not going to stop them until you catch them. But it may stop the casual fly tippers from dumping a few bits.
I'll get the figures and then we can look at what they say.
It was just when I was on about an incident. We had one down Infinity Parkway. A lot of people going down this road too. But a friend of ours was out walking the dog and she phoned Phil and said, right, there's someone, and they're just starting to unload the van. And he got in his car, put his hat on, got in his car and went down. And as it turned out, he knew who it was. And he says, you know, and as he walked up to the person, he said, oh, Phil, you're all right. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I've just seen some fly tipping. He says, I'm just putting it in the van. But he got a van full of stuff. And he was had to get all his concrete off the floor and put it back in his van. And of course, someone had actually called the police as well. So they turned up and said, right, well, if that's not all cleared up by 6 o'clock tonight, then we're coming back. So I don't know where he went. And he's got a waste carrier's license as well. And we'd had quite a few incidents around there at the time. So anyway, got all his stuff, and he asked him, his friend and said, I've swept up as well. But he was doing something wrong. And Phil's going, but why did you do it? Because, oh, it's just I didn't have the time. That was it. That came. I didn't have the time, so I thought I'll just, you know, I'll sweep up and I'll go on.
Relieve the van.
But then they've got the security guard of the place now, and he'll sit in his car on that road to stop people from going down there. And at the moment, if it was him, we've not had any incidents then, but it was just funny when he just said, I feel you. I'm cleaning up. I mean, no, you're not. His wife wasn't very happy neither because she had to clean it up as well. But yeah, it was funny because he did have a license, but he did used to live in Chellaston, but he doesn't now. So he'd actually come from a particular area to go there. So he knew, like hotspots, he would have known he didn't get caught, but obviously he didn't rely on the dog walker that was going past at the time. But yes, it's like I say, touch wood, we've not had any more so far. It was quite a funny one, really.
That's the fact.
How do you stand if there's a car park and Grove used to clean it up, or at the back of in the shops in Allenby? Now it's getting more and more of a problem with people dumping there. How would it be, or where would we stand if you put a sign up that says you're being watched on CCTV camera, even if you're not?
It's a private car park, isn't it?
No, it's a council car park.
Is it?
Yes.
When we did it, we were told it's a private car park.
No.
We can't do this.
Now,
In terms of that, putting up signs saying that the CCTV when there isn't, we're into what's the word I'm looking for, legal waters, because if we give the perception of something and something goes wrong, we are potentially liable.
well, that's what I wanted to know before I did it.
Yeah, don't do it.
I think there's a legal water issue. I think the bigger issue you've just announced on a live meeting, there's no CCTV, but you're going to put a sign up saying there is. I think that might be your bigger problem.
Well, I keep reporting it.
There you go. Any more questions from anybody at all?
I know I found a while ago we had big problems with fly tipping on Aston Lane, where you go into the back. And we went and put a camera, one of the wildlife cameras, in a little bird box, was focused down, but we didn't put anything else up. And we caught someone bang to rights with clear face, registration number, him putting the rubbish down, and the police, the PPO at the time said, yeah, we can do it. And then it turned out we weren't allowed to use it all because we breached the GDPR rules. But so why is, he was on about wildlife cameras, but why did we have to take that one down if we can do it?
We still have to put a sign up to say CCTV in operation. Yeah,
it doesn't. We've changed it one now, so it doesn't happen anyway.
Councillor Pandy is very familiar.
Yeah, and many battles. Yeah.
One final question for myself, Bob. How many extra PPOs are we taking on, and how many will that make the total number? And are they still sort of allocated on a locality basis?
We're still going to operate on a locality basis, so you have a dedicated person for each area. We will look to rotate them around just to build a bit of resilience, but also that people don't then burn out. He says, looking at Arboretum and Ormington councillors, we will move those around. So initially it's 3.5. That will take us to 10. We are working through our funding because we do receive additional funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office for ASB wardens. So that will potentially give us another 2. So 12 in total.
I mean, my conclusion on this one really is I don't think the council was wrong to try this out. I think it didn't cost us anything to do it. I think it hasn't worked, certainly in the way we wanted to, and I don't think that's the council's fault. I think maybe we could have not given them littering to do, but I don't think they'd have taken the contract if we hadn't done. And I think as we worried really, and I think as Executive Scrutiny worried at the time, it's harder to catch somebody dumping a van in an alleyway than it is to catch somebody dropping a litter or putting a cigarette out, and they focused on the things that were going to allow them to make money. I do take the slight irony in this one. This came to the same Executive Scrutiny and Cabinet meeting as the community managed libraries, as they then did as well, and it was 2 things that were looked at to go out, which the councils decided to keep in-house going forwards. So I think it will be interesting to see how things develop now over the next year, and I don't know if you can pass on our thanks to the PPOs for the work that they do, and certainly hopeful that with a more defined role going forwards, they're able to find that niche that they'll fall into and get the fly tipping rates down and get some more enforcement and some more convictions for it. I do sort of take the point around that enforcement level. I think the comparison to speeding is there. I think where I would contrast it is a friend of mine messaged me few weeks ago to say how long's there been a speed camera in Alice Street. I think it's just caught me, and then it took me about an hour and a half to get back to him. By that point he messaged me back to say, don't worry, I've just seen it's non-enforcement. And as soon as he found out it was non-enforcement, he wasn't bothered about whether it had caught him speeding or not. In fact, he didn't end up getting a letter about it. So as soon as he found out there was no enforcement, straight back to doing what he was. Had it been enforcement, I don't think his attitude would have been the same thing. I think speeding, and there is comparisons to make, there's contrast to it, but I do take the point that there is a need for that education side of things. Undoubtedly, I think that's true. But there is a point where you can't engage anymore, and that enforcement is just needed. And I think that would be the message from committee going forwards on this. But again, thank you for the report provided for this.
Yeah, and I'll definitely put something thanks to the PPOs. That'd be appreciated.
Thank you. So that takes us on to item 8 for the work programme going forwards. So we were looking at having the Horizon scanning report. Craig, if you can update us on this one, but we haven't got it.
Sorry, I will.
Not
share I will contact the SU place and get some main topics which are coming forward over the next couple of months, and that's you, Chair. Say as well, I've picked up some suggestions of potential future topics, so the stick around the VR headsets, likewise looking at perhaps getting a session for the committee, perhaps in the formal meeting or perhaps an informal session at the downstairs, CCTV cameras. Then picked up Pop's point as well around perhaps bringing a report back on domestic abuse and that thematic work that's taking place over the next couple of months.
Yep. Councillor Carr, so your hand as well.
On the work programme, is parking enforcement under the scrutiny board, or is it not?
not scheduled, but
Because we need to change that parking enforcement. Because I think culture of parking in certain parts and driving culture is all changed. And I think I believe because education again, but I believe in enforcement education. And I think in certain part of the city, you see the culture, there's one car park, obstruction for the rest. Okay? So you can't get a bus or a car to it. So I think we want to bring that if citizens start being of this committee, that's for parking enforcement.
I second that.
I will look if that fits within the remit of the committee. If not, though, one thing to just flag up is on Wednesday, we've arranged a meeting of all the scrutiny chairs. And one of the things that's going to be on the agenda for that meeting is looking at the everyone's work programme. And part of the thinking behind that is if a committee suggests one thing, well, it might not be right for that particular committee, but might fit in another's. So then we can just give everyone reassurance that those topics aren't falling by the wayside, but are being picked up by your colleagues.
Yeah. That's Rawson, so your hand.
Yeah. Can I just add to that the issue of enforcement safety as well? Because that's an issue where there seems to be limited. That's well, please.
So what I think we'll do as a way to go forward then looking at the November meeting. So we have on there the work done by Derby City Council and Derby Homes to increase the housing stock, which we discussed at the meeting last time. If it falls under the remit of our committee, I think let's get parking and the onto that as well. And then let's look at, can we get the VR headsets and can we get down to the CCTV room downstairs as well for that meeting? I think that will give us a good set of things to look at for that one. I think fly tipping has certainly been raised by us all, and I think having a report come on that as well would be very positive. It came as part of a package in January of this year, but it was as part of a package. We looked at a lot of things at the time. I think a specific report on fly tipping, where we are, what's going on, what are the numbers for this year would be positive. If we don't have parking under our remit, I think we bring that at the next meeting in November. If we do have parking, I think we bring fly tipping in January, which would be a year on from the last time we've discussed it. Of course, I can move those things around if, as a committee, we feel something else pertinent would want to come to that November meeting. But what we'll do is we'll get an update on that as soon as we can. And I'll either get confirmation that another board is going to discuss parking or that we can and that it's on our agenda. Does that sound okay to everybody as a way to go forward?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And of course, if anybody has any suggestions for anything to bring to January, to bring to another meeting, please do let me know. Always open suggestions. Just send myself and the vice chair an email. And at the November meeting, at the January meeting, we'll look at the dates then for a March-April meeting to schedule that additional one in. Okay, so thank you all for screening today. I think we've done a really